Hi and welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. It's Lois here and today I'll be painting this still life. This is something very different for me. I've never tackled anything like this in watercolour before. So it's a bit of an experiment, but I'm also going to be showing you how I come back from a seemingly impossible mistake. I pretty much ruined the painting very early on. But rather than giving up, I decided to press on with the painting, and I'm really glad I did, because when I got to the end, I worked out a way to come back from the mistake, to get over it and to cover it up. And I hope you'll agree that the painting worked out okay in the end. There's a full 3-part workshop for this over on Patreon, including the reference photograph and the outline to copy. So if you're interested in that, please follow the link below. So let's get on to the painting. Today I'm working on a gummed block of Arches cold pressed watercolour paper. It's about 9 inches by 12 inches or 23 centimetres by 31 centimetres. You can see I've drawn out a simple outline of a vase and some flowers and a cloth laying upon a surface. It's lovely and dark around the background, and that's what drew me to the scene. So I've masked out the flowers first and the little glints of light on the pot. I'm going to wet the dark area of the background, and then I'm going to turn the block upside down so I get a run of paint away from the subject matter, so I can keep the paint roughly in the dark area. Now my dark that I've mixed up is from Windsor Blue, Raw Sienna, Venetian Red and Burnt Sienna with a touch of alizarin crimson in it. So you can see that I've covered my whole background with that colour. Then I'm introducing a few pops of the same colour very quickly, wet in wet, and now some Burnt Sienna just to kind of get some orientation in for the table on which the vases are resting, or the surface. So I used a mop brush for the wash, and that's my large Escoda round brush for the background. Now I'm just going to pretty much leave it to dry upside down. And now I've turned it the right way up, I'm hoping that you can see the mistake. So I said I made the mistake earlier on, and there it is. I've got the shadows running into my pot in completely the wrong direction. The curve bellies into the pot, and it should be bellying out back towards the right. You may be thinking that I could lift that out quickly, but sadly I can't, because this mix has some staining colours in it. It's got Windsor Blue is particularly staining. So rather than make a mess of that lovely clean wash, I've decided to try and ignore that and get on and paint in some of the other features. So I'm using some very watery Windsor Blue to paint in the cloth, and trying to get the shadows and the highlights on the cloth by lifting some of the water out with a clean damp brush, or some of the paint out here and there to sort of show those lovely folds. I will keep working on that, building up the layers until I get some really nice dark shadows in the cloth later on. And now building up some shadow underneath and around the pot on the surface. This is again a mix of all my colours, but heavier this time on the Windsor Blue and the Burnt Sienna and a bit of Burnt Umber to really darken up that shadow. So the idea now is just to work around the cloth and the flowers, leaving the flowers protected by masking fluid, and just work around and see if I can just improve that dark mass on the right around the pot, up as far as the lavender that's coming out of the pot, or whatever those beautiful flowers are. When you make a big mistake, it's all you can see very often when you're painting, and all I can see at the moment is that glaring mistake. But the thing is, try and focus on the big picture, try and focus on everything else, because you can really learn so much from making a mistake. You can then learn how to sort of rectify it, Or even if it's something that can't be rectified, you can learn how to get over it, move beyond it, and then get out some more paper and try it again, this time learning from the mistake. So this is now me building up towards mending the mistake. So first I'm going to actually put burnt sienna and some cad yellow into the pot itself. A nice rich colour. I've decided to go away from the pale colour that I'd intended it to be to start with. And now I'm going to get some dark in and just paint the shadow of the rest of the pot. That'll give me a starting point to with the shape. I think here now you can see how wrong that curve is. Now I'm getting the other half of the pot in. It sort of emphasises how I just went in completely the wrong direction. Now I'm trying to brighten up the pot with a bit more of this cad yellow, dropping it into the wet paint. I'm going to sprinkle some salt into the paint, see if I can get any slight textures. If I get some texture in there, that might be a little bit more forgiving when I start working on removing that mistake and building up the pot shadows correctly. But for now, I'm going to let that dry and then move back onto the cloth and start getting some darker shadows into those folds. I'm still using Winsor Blue, but then I shall add some burnt umber and burnt sienna to the Winsor Blue a little bit later to get some much darker shadows. So I'm really enjoying this process. I've never done a still life before, and I found the arrangement of these objects quite fascinating, along with a really dark background. I think it would be easier to do this, well, not easier, but more straightforward to achieve a painting with such a black, dark background, with acrylics or oils probably, building up the layers, but still keeping variation, little sort of glows of colour and subtleties, that sort of thing. It's a little bit harder with watercolour, but I'm very happy with my background wash. I think once I can get the rest of it right, then I think it's going to look okay. Well, we saw it at the beginning and it does look okay, but I had that in mind as I was painting, that it could be saved. Now here's me adding some clean water to that side of the pot. I'm going to sort of see if I can lift any of it out to start with. I want to soften the edge. That's the important thing that I'm trying to do at the moment, softening the edge and then seeing what happens when I dab it out. See, the problem is, even though it's softening a little bit, that dark is still there. It's stained the paper. So I'm going to try and cover it with some really rich burnt sienna. The problem is, as that dries, it's transparent, so you will see that dark, wrong shape underneath. But here's my secret weapon. I've added some gouache, which is otherwise known as body paint. It's an opaque white paint, this one of mine, and I've mixed it with my burnt sienna, and I'm now using that to cover over the mistake. So bear in mind, if you plan properly and mix some nice colours, then you can cover over a mistake if you're careful, using this opaque paint mixed with your colours. And as you can probably see, I've also mixed some burnt umber and some of that dark with the Winsor Blue and burnt sienna in it to get some really nice darks. And I've just stippled and dotted it in along with the burnt sienna until I got a really nice smooth transition. Now here it is with the masking fluid removed, ready to paint the flowers. I'm just going to reduce the size of this shine or sort of glint of light, gleam of light on the pot. Again, just using a little bit of burnt sienna. It was too big, so I'm just going to carefully take that down and then dot some of that burnt sienna into the rest so that it's sort of blended in. And now it's just a few small details to finish off the flowers. I'm going to paint in the stems of the lavender or whatever these lovely flowers are, with a green mixed from ultramarine blue with a dash of lemon yellow and a little bit of burnt sienna to sort of take the tone down a bit. And I'm just dabbing that into the leaves. And now I'm going to quickly paint in the flowers with Opera Rose. Once I've got some Opera Rose in them, then I will, quite pale to start with. Then I'll build up and just dab wet in wet, dab a little bit of the darker colour in. And then I'll introduce some violet, and I'm going to use Cobalt Violet Deep for the purple flowers. The brush that I'm using is a size 4 Escoda Perla synthetic round brush. It's a really nice little brush for details like this. You can see I'm just dotting it into the lavender flowers. I don't mind if a little bit of the unpainted paper shows through. That will be little glints of light against that dark background, just adding sort of extra texture. Then very watery Opera Rose into these pale pink flowers on the cloth. And that works really nicely against the subtle shadows and folds of the cloth. So I'm not painting the flowers themselves, they're just little impressions of the flowers, just to add some beautiful pops of colour. The colours here are a lot nicer than it shows here in my studio. The lights aren't great, but I'll try and get a better photograph at the end for you. Now just a few pink highlights into the lavender, not too much because the flowers are purple, but just enough to just add that little bit of variation, that little bit of freshness. And just finishing off with a few dabs into the flowers, and that's pretty much the painting done. So I'm going to remove the tape and have a look and see how it looks, as always with its clean white border, bearing in mind the colours are darker and richer and really sumptuous compared with how it looks here. There is, as I said at the beginning, a full 3-part workshop with reference photographs for you to download and refer to on Patreon. So please follow the link below if you want a much fuller explanation of all the colours, the brushes, the techniques, everything that I'm doing here. Of course, I can only show you a summary in a quick video here on YouTube. So I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to everyone that supports us on Patreon. We couldn't run this channel without you, and we really appreciate each and every one of you. So thanks again, and take care. Have a lovely day, whatever you're doing, and I'll see you again soon. And happy painting. Bye.